Hi everyone, Armoured Pants here, and I have the next video from the French heavy line. It's the Tier 8, the AMX 50-100, because it has 100mm gun. We're going to have a look at the tech spec, and we're going to do that using blitzhanger.com as always. Now, I say it's a heavy line with a little tongue-in-cheek because this tank is not a heavy tank. It's not even a heavium. So we move from the Arl, which is a heavy tank, to the Tier 7, which the M445, which is kind of a heavium. But this is not even a heavium. This is a pure medium tank. And you've moved that way in 3 tiers. So if you're expecting a heavy tank, be warned, because it's not. And we'll have a look at the tech in a second. Now, the view range is not super, so protective kit is an option over using the Can Pate. It has 2 90mm guns and a 100mm top gun, which gives the tank its name. The best DPM, as you would imagine, is with the top gun. You get 232mm of pen on AP rounds, giving you 310 damage points plus per round. So you get almost 1,000 burst damage, which is really good at Tier 8, right? You get 263mm of pen on APCR rounds, giving you 260 damage points plus, which is very good. 50mm of pen on HE rounds, giving you 350 plus damage points, which is very effective. And by the way, you're going to see this in the gameplay. I use HE in the game that we're going to look at. 100mm per second muzzle velocity. Supercharge brings it up to 1300 meters per second. You get a 3-second reload on the rounds when the magazine is full, but you've got a 19.8, almost 20-second magazine reload. And that creates a problem which we're going to discuss later on. You've got 6 degrees of gun depression, which is different to the previous tank, which had very good gun depression. And you've got 13 degrees of elevation, so this gun has limited vertical maneuverability with its gun handling. You need to be aware of that, especially after playing the Tier 7, which had really excellent gun depression. Now, this tank has excellent mobility. Its power to weight ratio is really good. This is why I say it's more like a medium tank. In fact, it's better maneuverability than many medium tanks, like for example the American ones at Tier 8. It has excellent traverse speed, and here we look at the top speed, 45 kilometers an hour, 20 in reverse. But it's not just the top speed; it's how quickly it gets there, and that's this effective power to weight ratio. It accelerates quickly. It moves from a standstill quickly. Goes up hills quickly, etc. So it really is, in terms of its maneuverability, etc., a medium tank. But looking at the concealment numbers, it is not a medium tank. It simply does not have the view range or the concealment numbers of most medium tanks. Therefore, you can't play this as a pure medium tank. You have to allow for those limitations. If you go off and play as a medium tank, going to spot the enemy, etc., following, for example, the tactics that we suggest on the medium tank guide here, playing your standard medium tank role, you're going to get into trouble, because the enemy's going to spot you before you see them, and they're going to start putting rounds into you. If you are then spotted by one of the larger guns in your team, a Rim Borsig, or if you're up tier, the Waffle Tractor or an ISU, something like that, with this armor profile that we're looking at here, you're going to take serious damage and have a very short and frustrating game. This tank, as you saw, has a little bit of armor on the front, not much. It's not heavy tank armor. It has some decent relative armor numbers on the side, so you can kind of side scrape in it a bit, but you know, it's not. But if you're up against, if you try to play this in a frontline heavy tank, you're up against an IS-3 or something like that, you're not going to come off very well. You are going to get smashed, because your armor profile compared to his is not good. You can't therefore play it as we also said, as a standard medium tank either. And at the back and sides it has light tank armor. So what kind of tank is this, and how do I play it well? Well, it's difficult, I have to say. And by the way, I don't think there's any shame in admitting that, right? Because this is not, it doesn't fit into any of the standard tank types. So therefore, you can even be an experienced player with thousands of games under your belt. If you've never played this line before, you can run into trouble. But there's no shame in admitting that, right? I mean, if to say that it's not the case is actually sort of a stupid thing to do, right? Yeah, you need to admit what this tank is and what it's not. So this tank has several advantages, right? Its speed, the incredible burst damage it can do, and its maneuverability, right? But you can't really play it as a standard medium tank. I wouldn't recommend playing as a standard heavy tank either. So therefore, how do you do it? Well, this basically is a gun platform. If you've seen my review of the Lorraine 40T, I say the same thing about that. You have the ability to inflict massive burst damage on the enemy, and you have the ability to get into a position quickly to do that. So therefore, what I suggest you do in this tank is that you go and support your medium tanks and your light tanks. You let them spot the enemy. You stay behind, keep safe. When they've spotted up targets, then you unload your almost 1000 DPM burst damage into the enemy, duck back into cover or behind another tank or behind some hard cover and reload, because you have this 20-second reload. By the way, if you're in a brawl, if you get caught out in the open with enemy tanks, this 20 seconds seems like a lifetime. So you need to be aware that you need to find cover, safety somewhere when you're reloading, because when you're reloading you are completely inactive. You cannot influence the aim. There's nothing you can do, and with this tank you are not going to bounce shots. So therefore you need to find cover. You need to be like Scooby-Doo. You need to be a coward, because that's the only way of being successful in this tank. Now, this is exactly what happened here. I let the AMX, the light tank, spot up the enemy. I came around from behind, ambush tanking, and I put 3 HE rounds, one AP and 2 HE rounds into that guy, and you saw how effective the HE rounds are. So because your shots are precious in this tank. Why do I mean this? And again, it's about shot selection. The same thing again, 1 AP round. Now I switch up to HE because I have his butt in view. 3, 4, 7, and then look at this last round here. Smash one right into him, and I get a beautiful alpha roll, 473. And this is why shot selection is so important in this tank. Why? Because your shots are precious. They are gems. They are diamonds. You don't have the automatic reload that you're getting in the European line. If you fire a shot in this and miss, it costs a lot, because then you only have 2 shots in your magazine and you've got another almost 20 seconds to wait before you get your full burst damage again. So shot selection is extremely important. You need to make your shots count, and I can't emphasize that enough. Don't fire shots on spec. Don't fire shots, blind shots, etc. Because it's not like another tank where you just fire a shot, you reload, and you're back in the game. You've lost nothing. Here, firing your shots off is really the equivalent to dipping into your savings. And if you take that as a life metaphor, we dip into our savings only when we know it's going to count, or for very good reason. So treat your shots like that. Now, in a situation like this against a standard heavy tank, which the T29 is, you can see how the maneuverability of this tank, right? You can see how good it is. It can get you out of trouble. And if you're on a 1v1 situation against a heavy tank, that's not so bad, because you can keep out of trouble. You can go around cover as I did there. The problem you face is if you're in a brawl with this in a medium tank or a light tank, particularly if you have fired off 1 or 2 rounds from your magazine, you are in serious trouble if you get isolated in this thing, because that medium tank is going to put 4 rounds into you, 5 if some tanks drop adrenaline, while you are reloading your full magazine. You can't do anything. If it's a medium tank, you can't get away from him. You're not going to bounce shots from him because you have almost no armor, and you are just going to get into serious trouble. So you need to be really aware of that too. You need to be aware of where the reds are and keep yourself out of trouble. And you also need to watch your shell count in your magazine very carefully and decide where you're going to go when you're down to 1 shell, and where you're going to find cover, and how you're going to use that time to stay safe. Now, we saw there a good example of how to play this tank, get out a mastery game. I allowed my light tanks to spot up. I came in then after them. I effectively ambushed a couple of tanks. I used my shell selection, shot selection really carefully, really well. I then used the speed of the tank to flank. I knew where all the enemy are. I'm pretty okay against heavy tanks. I'm confident that the maneuverability of my tank will keep me out of trouble. I made sure I didn't get isolated, didn't get into a brawling situation with another medium or light tank where I will be extremely vulnerable. on the reload. And I just used those lessons in that game that I went through here in this short guide. Your shots are precious, they're valuable, make them count. Shell selection is vital. Make sure you do as much damage as you can with shells. So be conscious of your HE rounds. Make sure you know how many rounds you have. Watch your shell count in your magazine. It's extremely important. Don't get isolated. Don't go off on your own. You will get spotted up. You have poor concealment, poor range numbers. Even if you max out the range, it's still very poor. So, you know, be careful in this tank. If you play it to those, if you play it to those rules, you can have great reward, as I had in that game, over 4.2k of damage in tier 8. It's very good, right? And this tank can deliver damage like that with this burst damage. But in between that, when you're inactive, you need to be aware of where you are and where the reds are. So that's a recap. This is not a heavy tank. It's nowhere near a heavy tank. You need to play it as a medium tank. It has some frontal armor. You can side scrape, particularly if you're against the lower tier, but I wouldn't recommend that as the ideal tactics. But if you're in a scrape, pardon the pun, you can side scrape. It is agile and mobile. It gets around the map, but don't go out in the lead. You need somebody else to spot for you. It has great gun handling, as you saw there in the shots early on in the game, particularly on the T49 when he's running away. 13 per second muzzle velocity gives it good gun handling, so therefore I would use supercharge on it. You can use vertical stabilizer, by the way, instead of refined gun if you want to, because you will fire when you're moving in this tank. 6 degrees of gun depression, very limited elevation too, but it has excellent reverse, and it's an excellent brawler if you have a full magazine and you're against a tank that has less than 900 damage points. Otherwise, it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It is not a good brawler, so bear that in mind as we discussed during the tutorial. Watch your sides and your butt, because you have very little armor, and big H guns are in your tiers and they will eat you for breakfast. So, not an easy tank to play, but if you follow those rules, you will have far more success than not. The music is the brilliant French composer Saint-Cyr and Danse Macabre, which is a wonderful piece of music, and the Can-Can from Offenbach. So cheers much, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.